One of my favorite things about Marvel Comics is getting to see some of my favorite heroes team up in new and exciting ways to take on various threats. It's an aspect that I think the MCU has really nailed over the past decade. But before the MCU, we didn't really get to see this kind of teaming up outside of the comics, especially in gaming, maybe with the exception of Marvel vs. Capcom 2. That all changed in 2006 when Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 released, promising an expansive roster of the Marvel Universe to mix and match together to form your own personal superhero dream team. A promise that developer Raven Software would keep, with over 30 characters to choose from depending on which platform you decided to buy it on. Speaking of which, all of the gameplay footage you'll be seeing throughout this video comes from the Xbox One Remastered Edition. Before we can get into Marvel Ultimate Alliance itself, we should first talk about its history and how it came to be.
Wolverine, you do it, Boy Scout. I don't take orders from you.
We can't talk about Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 without first addressing its biggest influence, the X-Men Legends series. We'll hopefully discuss X-Men Legends 1 and 2 in their own retrospectives, but the success of those games paved the way for Ultimate Alliance. The premise is pretty much the same, where you would select your own custom team of X-Men characters, level them up, and traverse a varied landscape of X-Men comic locations. The core gameplay elements established in X-Men Legends were pretty much copy and pasted into Marvel Ultimate Alliance as the foundation on which Ultimate Alliance would further refine and build upon. This is why the three games play pretty similar. Since the core gameplay had already been established by the previous two Legends games, the development cycle was pretty short, with Ultimate Alliance releasing only a year after X-Men Legends 2, and only 2 years after X-Men Legends 1. Nevertheless, Raven Software was able to craft an amazing journey through the Marvel Universe via Ultimate Alliance, a game that is still fondly looked back on by fans even now, roughly 14 years after its release. The game reviewed positively as well, with a current Metacritic score of 82, and sales seem to have been pretty decent for the time based on comments by game programmer Aaron Sanfilippo.
Yeah.
I mean, something you gotta understand is I think Moa sold 4 million copies, maybe 5 million over its lifetime total. And that includes like a bundle deal with an Xbox or something like that, you know? So, like, as cool as that was for Raven, like, it was our biggest success to date.
But now that we know a little bit about Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1's backstory, let's talk about the game itself. We'll start by walking through the story and discussing each level, and then we'll get into some of the core gameplay features and discuss how the game holds up today. But before we get into it, I should point out that I will be spoiling every facet of Ultimate Alliance 1. So if you're wanting to play through the game for yourself first, I recommend doing so before resuming this video.
What the hell is going on? Where's our air support? Get those forward guns going! Why aren't those rear batteries firing? Somebody get General Wilson on the horn!
Colonel Fury,
Doom, I'll have your head for this.
I have little time for your petty threats, Colonel. Surrender your ship now, or I shall destroy it.
Not on my watch.
The story begins with Dr. Doom staging an attack on the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. This prompts Nick Fury to call in any available superhumans to assist in preventing the helicarrier's destruction. The first four to answer the call are Captain America, Thor, Wolverine, and Spider-Man. All future cinematic cutscenes will revolve around these four heroes, and they will be our default team at the beginning of the game. As we move through the helicarrier, we start to learn more about Doom's plans from his various henchmen and Nick Fury's intel. It turns out that Doom is hatching a plan to take over the world and has enlisted a vast assortment of Marvel villains to assist him in accomplishing this goal. In return, Doom promises to grant these villains great power and leadership.
He has a plan that will give us all enough power to live like kings for an eternity.
Quiet, Chen. You've already said too much.
After fighting through a variety of villains such as Bullseye, Scorpion, Winter Soldier, Radioactive Man, and the dragon Fin Fang Foom, we save the helicarrier. However, it still has taken a ton of damage, preventing it from being a viable headquarters for the remainder of the game. This leads us to hunker down in Stark Tower as we await further missions.
Why is he always late?
Hello, team. Welcome to Stark Tower, my pride and joy.
Stark Tower is our first main hub away from battle where we can explore, talk to other Marvel characters, find collectibles, and engage in other side activities before continuing the main game. We'll talk more in depth about these side activities a bit later in the video. But first, we're sent on a couple more missions. First, we head to the Omega base to investigate a strange transmission from Dum Dum Dugan. It turns out that Doom has rigged the Omega base to crash into a local dam, which would flood the surrounding area. If I'm being totally honest, the Omega Base isn't a super exciting level since it looks pretty similar to the Helicarrier mission we just played, and overall there aren't very many memorable moments here, aside from a pretty cool boss fight against MODOK. Yes, the same villain headlining the Marvel's Avengers video game, and here you can really see how much graphics have advanced over the past 14 years. But I love this MODOK fight because it isn't your typical boss. Before duking it out and excessively punching him in his oversized face, he'll test you with trivia.
Your pleas amuse me. I tell you what, let's have a contest. But instead of brawn, how about a test of brains?
You're frozen in place and asked a series of questions. If you get one wrong, you'll receive a damaging shock. It's a pretty simplistic approach to a boss fight, but it adds another layer besides just punch punch punch, which I appreciate. Plus, getting an answer incorrect made me feel like a big dumbass, which inevitably added some pressure for the next question and made me more susceptible to MODOK's taunting, which was a nice touch whether it was intentional or not. After the Omega Base, we head to Atlantis to free King Namor the Submariner, who's been overthrown by his Atlantean people. We later learn that the Atlantean people have been mind-controlled by sonic emitters given to Atuma by Dr. Doom. In return, Doom is allowed to claim an artifact of his choosing from the Atlantean catacombs.
I will tell you nothing.
Okay, I'll talk.
Tiger Shark!
I'm not about to face the Atlanteans after what we did. It was the Masters of Evil. They helped Atuma in return for letting them take whatever they wanted from the catacombs.
In my opinion, the Atlantis mission is the low point of the Marvel Ultimate Alliance campaign. Underwater levels are notorious for hindering gameplay, and the Atlantis mission is no different. The level design itself is actually pretty cool, and I like the atmosphere it provides, but the combat felt a little slow and clunky as I went through it. To top it off, Ultimate Alliance released around the height of QuickTime events, and we get a pretty unimpressive boss fight against the Kraken here. I know I'm being kind of down on Ultimate Alliance's early gameplay missions, but make no mistake, I'm going to gush hard over Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 as we continue through this retrospective. But I could totally see a scenario where a new player might play through these first 3 levels, lose interest, and just stop. That would be deeply disappointing though, because after this mission is really where Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 picks up steam. That mission is the Valley of Spirits, home of the Mandarin. But before we get into that mission, some backstory is needed for some other villains. Dr. Doom has assembled his own group of supervillains called the Masters of Evil. The Masters of Evil are headed up by 4 key villains alongside Doom: Loki, Enchantress, Baron Mordo, and Ultron. The Mandarin was apparently approached to join their group but declined, so Doom decided to punish him by manipulating the heroes to fight him. In Atlantis, we come across the Mandarin, but it's actually Loki impersonating the Mandarin. This leads our heroes to target Mandarin in the Valley of Spirits, where Doom hopes will take each other out.
Loki, are you certain your ploy in Atlantis worked?
My good doctor, how could you doubt the god of mischief? My performance as Mandarin was flawless. Rest assured, the heroes will travel to the Valley of Spirits.
The Valley of Spirits mission is a refreshing level of great environmental design and fun new enemies to beat. The statues are really satisfying to break and the boss fights are unique, one of which is against Grey Gargoyle, who can turn you to stone just by touching you. The first boss fight against Mandarin is also inventive because Mandarin will occasionally hide out and send the destroyer after you. You have to trick the destroyer into teleporting to the Mandarin and blowing up, leaving Mandarin vulnerable. I know these boss fights aren't anything groundbreaking, but I really appreciate how Raven Software attempted to differentiate every boss fight and make them feel unique. Outside of boss fights, there is another exciting moment where we run into Doctor Strange, who will aid us in battle for a time, before becoming a newly unlocked character for the duration of the game. Picking up new heroes throughout the story is always exciting, and this level is the first time we're able to do so. After beating Mandarin and realizing we were tricked by Loki, Nick Fury decides we need more of a magic advantage. This leads us to our next main hub, the Sanctum Sanctorum, home of Doctor Strange. This is probably my favorite hub in the game because the design team really nailed the feeling of the Sanctum Sanctorum. All the purple hues and the magical artifacts make it feel like it was ripped right from the comics. It's clear that the developers at Raven Software had a passion for the comics and took time to get the details right, and I don't just mean in the Sanctum, but in the entirety of the game. Although I think their attention for detail is especially evident here. But back to the story, we learn that Doom has kidnapped X-Men characters Nightcrawler and Jean Grey.
Shield the castle! Now!
Get him to the lab immediately.
Professor Xavier was able to locate their presence in Doom's castle, which is where we are transported next. But there's one problem. Baron Mordo casted a spell that made us portal to a different location disguised as Doom's castle. And if you start punching the walls, you'll notice more of a carnival architecture. That's because we've actually been sent to Murderworld, home of the villain Arcade, and right here I just want to pause and say that to me, this is the peak level of Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1. Whoever designed Murderworld clearly had a blast and let all of their creativity fly. Some of the wackiest and most inventive moments are in this level. For example, at one point you're transported into an arcade machine where your hero has to traverse the old school side-scroller Pitfall. You'll also have to play Brick Blast as a way to progress a mission. My favorite QuickTime event is here too, where we have to save Blade, who is trapped in a claw machine. After saving him, he will be unlocked as a playable character. You'll also get to overcome your fear of clowns here, because it is incredibly satisfying whooping on each of these creepy-ass clowns. Our final boss fight is Arcade piloting a giant robot, but it's unfortunately another QuickTime event. However, I forgive it because the rest of the level is so damn creative. But once Arcade is defeated, he snitches on Doom and tells the heroes that he used the mutant amplifier on Nightcrawler, enhancing his teleportation abilities to get them into Mephisto's realm. As you would expect, we head to Mephisto's realm ourselves in an attempt to save Nightcrawler. Jean Grey helps us out, but is inevitably captured by Blackheart. After beating Blackheart, we are forced to choose whether we want to save Nightcrawler or Jean, which will sort of impact our ending, but more on that later. For now, I chose to save Nightcrawler since it felt like it would be weird to sacrifice him even though he's a playable character in my roster. Speaking of sacrifices, we're also able to unlock Ghost Rider, but we have to sacrifice one of our playable characters in order to do so. Sorry, Cap. We'll inevitably get that character back by the end of the level, but I think it's a cool concept to make us give up a hero for the rest of the level in order to get a new one. But now that we've saved Nightcrawler and Ghost Rider, it's time to take on Mephisto himself. Mephisto reveals that this is just another diversion planned by himself and Dr. Doom. Mephisto wanted the heroes to enter his realm so he could have their souls. In return, Mephisto gives Doom the Twilight Sword, something Doom will use in Asgard. This leads to another unique boss fight where we have to steal Mephisto's sword to destroy a series of statues, and also we have to fight whichever X-Man we didn't save, in this case for me, Jean Grey. Even though we inevitably beat Mephisto, Jean is still trapped in the realm, and we are forced to leave her there. It's a sad moment, but there's no time to waste because Loki has begun his assault on Asgard in an attempt to claim the throne.
Ho, brave warriors of Asgard! I have come to pay my respects to Odin.
Loki.
And of course, I brought presents. Behold, my tribute to the All-Father. The day of reckoning has arrived! Long have I been denied my rightful place. But now, I have the power to take it! Odin's throne will be mine!
Asgard is our next main hub and consists of another impressive series of levels. We can even choose which mission we want to tackle first, restoring the Bifrost or saving Heimdall, Balder, and Tyr. The Bifrost mission will conclude with a boss fight against the Wrecking Crew, a group of villains who were accidentally given godlike powers, and after saving Balder we'll fight the Executioner and Enchantress. This is also the point where we start to take down key members of the Masters of Evil. We of course eliminate Enchantress, but will later find that Ultron and Baron Mordo have been double-crossed and left behind. That doesn't stop us from whooping that ass though. After getting past Ultron and Mordo, we run into Loki. He's a challenging boss fight, but he's dispatched all the same, or at least we think. After defeating Loki, we're sent to the Hall of Heroes where everything seems nice and peaceful. We get an alert from Nick Fury to claim 4 swords and break the destroyer armor out of the ice. Once we accomplish this task, it's revealed that this was all another illusion by Loki, and we're now being hunted by the destroyer armor that we just freed. This boss fight was a little more obscure since you can't damage the destroyer, but your goal is to find where Loki's hiding and get the destroyer armor to blast him, severing their tie. It's not entirely clear that you have to do this, but I luckily did it on accident. We're not in the clear yet though. Earlier we had found the broken Twilight Sword, insinuating that Doom had used it against Odin and stolen his powers. After our fight with Loki, Doom, now enhanced by the powers of Odin, decides to instantly kill us. However, at the very last second, Uatu the Watcher intervenes and gives us a second chance at life.
Am I dead? Why does heaven smell like a wet dog? Oh wait, never mind.
I am Uatu, the Watcher. I prevented your deaths, for you are needed to save this universe.
Uatu knows that the fate of the universe is at stake, and our alliance of heroes are the only shot at defeating him. Not only has Uatu saved us from death, he also informs us on how to beat Doom. We have to go to the Shi'ar Empire to retrieve the Makran crystal, and we also have to steal a device from Galactus while he attempts to devour the Skrull homeworld. Easy, right? Well, the Shi'ar Empire should be easy because apparently Professor Xavier and their leader Lilandra used to have a thing.
Xavier's the one who's close to Lilandra. They used to be good friends. Really good friends, if you catch my meaning.
Ooh, guess that means Lilandra's not gonna be some wrinkled old prune of a queen.
You can say that again, bub.
But when we arrive, Lilandra has been overthrown and captured by her sister Deathbird. I don't have a lot to discuss with the Shi'ar Empire, but it's still a pretty solid level. For one, it's our first foray into a more cosmic-based level, with a lot of characters you probably aren't familiar with. Right at the beginning, we are introduced to Corsair, a member of the Starjammers and father of Cyclops. He'll assist for the first part of the mission, but then takes a back seat by guiding us through the level via radio. We'll also fight against different Shi'ar guards who are sworn to follow the orders of their leader. The boss fights aren't too intricate here, but they are more challenging, and I found myself losing teammates more frequently, which I think is a good thing. I also like the end of the mission since it introduces a timed section where we have to destroy parts of the ship to prevent it from exploding. A twist is thrown into that though. In the middle of this time trial, we'll find a captured Lilandra and we have to make a choice. Leave her and save the ship, or try to save her by destroying this extremely durable console. I'm not usually a fan of time trials, but in this case, it added a lot of tension as I tried to determine if I had enough time to free her and still save the ship. Saving Lilandra is also an optional choice that can impact your alternate ending. But after saving Lilandra, beating Deathbird, and retrieving the Makran crystal, we now head to the Skrull homeworld while Galactus is still in the process of destroying it. This is another favorite level of mine for a few reasons. The first is that we will often see Galactus walking alongside us as we fight our way through enemies. We can't interact with him yet, but it adds more to the atmosphere and gives Galactus a sense of scale and foreboding as we traverse the level. The majority of this level takes place high above the ground with no railings to prevent you from accidentally walking off the map. But on the flip side, this means that it's open season for throwing enemies off the map, and man is that enjoyable. I know this probably sounds sadistic, but it's always a joy hearing the enemy yell as they're thrown off the ledge. Throwing enemies was an aspect of combat that was removed in Ultimate Alliance 3, so it was nice to get to revisit that playstyle again here. Another cool part of this level is that the enemies will actually fight each other. When we arrive, Galactus' minions and the Skrulls are already duking it out, so we often just jump into the middle of those fights, which is a fun change of pace. One of my favorite mini-bosses is on this level too, which is Titanus. The combat of this fight isn't anything new, but the way it's formatted really sets the right tone. The camera zooms way back, giving you a sense of how massive the battle arena is, but everything is destructible. Titanus will constantly charge into things, destroying everything in his path. By the end of the fight, pretty much the whole area is destroyed, which makes the fight feel much more impactful and intense. After defeating Titanus, we'll continue back on the rooftops, but now Galactus is actually pursuing us. I loved this. The only thing you can do is run away and try to get past enemies and obstacles as quickly as possible. It's extremely tense as Galactus gets closer and closer. If you're playing with AI teammates, you're definitely going to witness them fall behind and get taken out by Galactus. This is definitely intentional though, because once you escape, you'll be greeted by the Silver Surfer who revives your group. This ends with a final battle against Galactus where you control the Silver Surfer in another QuickTime event. I know I've been bashing QuickTime events a lot in this video, but I do at least like how thematic it feels soaring through the sky and evading Galactus' attacks. It's a bit repetitive after the second time you've done it, but I can't help but to enjoy my time as the Silver Surfer. But with Galactus defeated, we take the final device we need against Doom. Before heading to Doom's castle, Uatu informs us of what Doom has been up to since we last saw him.
Much has transpired since you were last on Earth. Mankind did its best to defend itself against Doom. But even their greatest weapons were as nothing before Doom's power. The heroes of your world also tried to stop Doom, and paid the ultimate price. To corrupt. And with this discovery, Doom began corrupting your entire world.
Doom has done exactly as he planned and has taken over the Earth. We can even see a few of our fallen heroes in the background of this cutscene. For example, we can see Gambit and Hulk have already been defeated off to the side, while Colossus and Cyclops are the next two to feel Doom's wrath. Colossus ended up being playable on PS3 and Xbox 360, while Cyclops and Hulk would later be added to the game as DLC, but unfortunately, this is the only time we see Gambit in Ultimate Alliance 1. Luckily, he'll be added as a playable character in the next two Ultimate Alliance games. So now that our team has returned to Earth, we finally make our way to Castle Doom. But instead of immediately taking on Doom, he guides us through his castle as a way to show off his power. Throughout our tour of his castle, we'll come across a ton of Doom bots, as well as some dark versions of our different heroes, most of which are all playable characters, but interestingly, we'll also fight against Dark Psylocke, who hadn't made an appearance elsewhere in the game. Her boss fight is pretty fun and includes an interesting upside-down mechanic against Dark Cyclops, but let's skip ahead to the grand finale, our final fight against Doom. We're initially engaged by the dark clones of the Fantastic Four before approaching Doom and stealing part of his power. At this point, Doom unleashes an endless barrage of Fantastic Four clones, but even with a fraction of Odin's powers, we swat them away like flies. Even Doom himself gets flung across the map as we hit him. It's a good way to make us feel the power we've acquired, but it's a bit frustrating from a gameplay perspective, because instead of feeling like you're in an intense fight, you're really just chasing Doom around the map trying to get a hit in. But overall, this was a solid final boss and a good way to end the game. Speaking of which, Odin's powers are immediately returned to him upon beating Doom, and as you would expect, he's pretty pissed off.
You've accomplished nothing. Doom! Odin! You can't be free! Your wretched scheme is undone, and your black soul is mine! No! An eternity of suffering is the fate of those who challenge the gods!
Even better, we're left with a massive, hype-inducing cliffhanger cutscene of Galactus swearing revenge against Earth, suggesting that he will be the main villain of the second game. But we'll talk more about how that plays out in the Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2 retrospective.
Such insignificant creatures. They dare steal from Galactus. For that, I will destroy their planet.
As far as my overall thoughts of the story, I found it to be pretty engaging. I know it's not anything groundbreaking, but after analyzing it more for this video, I found it had more depth than I originally gave it credit for when I played it years ago. Doom's schemes make sense, and there are some pretty good twists and deceptions from Loki. Ultimately, the point of the story is to navigate us through a plethora of Marvel Universe locations, and I think it accomplishes that very well. I also think that the team at Raven Software did a great job at level selection because it's a good sampling of what the Marvel Universe has to offer, and aside from the Helicarrier and Omega base, no two levels feel the same. Each location is very unique in its own right, and you can tell that level designers were given a lot of free rein to get creative. The lore of the Marvel Universe is also very nicely tied into the story, with dialogue being aimed to inform players who aren't as familiar with the comics. Even outside of the main story, you can expand your knowledge on Marvel topics just by talking to NPCs. You'll learn a lot about different characters and their history, all summed up in a matter of sentences. So if you're interested in learning more about Marvel lore, you're definitely rewarded for engaging with different characters. I think this also goes to show just how much passion for the comics the development team had, because these little details could have easily been half-assed or excluded in any other game. If you're already a big Marvel Comics fan and you're entering Marvel Ultimate Alliance with a pretty expansive lore knowledge base, you'll get even more out of the game. Characters will make more sense to you, and you'll have a better understanding of their relationships. I think you'll also be able to appreciate all the details and Easter eggs that are littered throughout the game's story and environments. When I first played Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1, I was still a novice in the Marvel Universe. Ultimate Alliance 1 was able to spark an interest in Marvel that I hadn't previously had, making me want to explore the game's lore and even the comic books as a way to learn more about these characters. I've also found that the more I learn about the Marvel Universe as a whole, the more I've come to appreciate what Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 was able to accomplish. This game came out before the MCU was a thing, but a lot of the characters and story beats from the movies are present here. This isn't too surprising since the movies draw from the comics for inspiration, the same way games do, but my point is that even if you're a casual Marvel fan who's only familiar with the movies, you would still get a lot out of Marvel Ultimate Alliance. But to sum up, I think the story and the world building are top-notch in Ultimate Alliance 1, and I think Raven Software deserves a lot of credit for the amount of lore they were able to jam into this game without it feeling overly dense. So now that we've run through the main story, let's discuss how alternate endings come into play.
All is well, but the tale is not yet complete. While pursuing Dr. Doom, your actions have had ramifications you could not possibly imagine. Allow me to show you the future you helped to create.
Throughout the story, you'll come across optional missions like saving Lilandra. Whether you choose to complete each mission or not will give you a different alternate ending. I'm using the phrase alternate ending pretty loosely though, because the main ending is still the same every time. Doom is struck down by Odin, and Captain America assures Nick Fury that the heroes will return when they're needed.
I don't care if you like me, but if a threat like this comes again, can S.H.I.E.L.D. count on your help? The world can count on us, sir.
The alternate endings I'm referring to basically describe future events that would unfold after the main story, based on your actions throughout the game. I won't go through all of them because there are quite a few, but some really stood out as storylines I would like to see play out in a sequel or some kind of side quest. Here are a couple examples of the ones I found most interesting.
It was most wise of you to save Odin from his confinement in Castle Doom. In the near future, the mighty Thanos will seek to conquer Earth. Only intervention by Thor's father will save the human race from enslavement. You are to be congratulated for locating the damaged Ultimate Nullifier at Castle Doom. One day soon, Mephisto will seek to conquer our dimension. But Reed Richards will repair the Ultimate Nullifier and use it to stop the vile creature before all is lost.
The alternate endings don't really add much to the story, but it is a creative idea by Raven Software to add more depth to your actions throughout the game. I think their goal was to put you in the shoes of a superhero and display how even small acts of heroism will yield a better future for everyone, and for that alone I think it was successful. So I think we've talked plenty about the story, so let's transition more to gameplay, starting with characters and their combat.
Indeed. I would find it most enjoyable if my dear brother Thor were to fall in battle. Long has he been a thorn in my side. Oh, don't look so sad, Enchantress. When our ultimate plan is realized, you will find others more worthy of your attention than Thor.
I should hope so, Loki. Still, it saddens me that Thor must die. He is truly a god to be admired.
That pompous fool's overdeveloped physique is nothing compared to my conniving intellect. Now, I have longed to crush his self-righteous countenance beneath my booted heel.
Silence!
I mentioned earlier that we get a little over 30 characters in this game, 33 to be exact, or at least that's the amount of characters you would have in the remastered edition that I'm using, or the gold edition for Xbox 360 that includes the Heroes and Villains DLC packs. Surprisingly, these two DLC packs were sold exclusively for Xbox 360 and not on PlayStation 3. Speaking of exclusives, there were other exclusive characters for different platforms that aren't present here. For example, I believe the PSP version had Black Widow and the original Captain Marvel as exclusives. Regardless, I think this 33 character roster is pretty inclusive and covers a lot of the Marvel Universe bases. The only area that I feel is kind of lacking is on cosmic characters, since we really only have Silver Surfer and I guess Ms. Marvel. Perhaps they would have had a bigger role in the second game had it followed the Galactus cliffhanger. Nevertheless, I think that even if your favorite Marvel hero isn't on display here, you'll still have an easy time finding a hero you love and recognize, as well as an assortment of heroes you might not recognize. For me, this was my first introduction to characters like Deadpool, Moon Knight, and Spider-Woman. The character roster is surprisingly relevant today, even if your only knowledge of Marvel comes from the MCU movies. However, characters like Black Panther, Iron Man, Thor, and Hawkeye weren't considered household names at the time of MUA's release. In 2006, casual fans of the movies who tried Ultimate Alliance out probably gravitated towards a different batch of heroes. If we look back at the popular movies from around 2006, the big names at the time were the Fantastic Four, X-Men, Blade, Daredevil, and Spider-Man, with Elektra, Fantastic Four, and X-Men The Last Stand as the most recent Marvel movie releases before Ultimate Alliance. A few months later, we would get the Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider movie, Spider-Man 3, and Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer. A pretty rough couple years for Marvel fans. It wouldn't be until another 2 years later that we would get the MCU's Iron Man movie, a monumental momentum shift for Marvel. So it's cool to look back on this roster and think about how these characters were perceived back then compared to now. Regardless of hero popularity, each character gets a strong attention to detail in Ultimate Alliance 1. With the exception of Moon Knight, each character is given 4 unique outfits from the comics, each with its own upgradable attributes. Believe it or not, this is an aspect that future Ultimate Alliance games would struggle to match. The skills for each hero are also carefully crafted to match each hero's unique abilities, and there are a good variety to choose from for each character. The way skills are outlined, you typically get about 7 skills to choose from, where roughly 5 of those are attacks and 2 are buffs. Of these 7, you can only select 3, with a 4th slot belonging to your hero's extreme ability, a massive area of effect attack that you have to build up over time. The skill variety is plentiful here, and it can be enjoyable trying out different configurations to get your character to a point that you feel the most powerful. Even though some abilities are basically the same amongst different characters, they are stylized and varied enough that they still feel unique, and the abilities never feel out of character. There are a couple instances where skills are very unique to a character, and my favorite example of this is Doctor Strange's ability Black Magic, where you have a high chance to blast an enemy and turn them into a crate. If successful, you can throw that crate off a building, hit an enemy with it, or break it open to retrieve coins. It's a great example of how much fun and creativity was put into the game. Not only are skills fun to use, but basic combat is equally addicting. Besides using 4 abilities, your combat primarily consists of utilizing different combinations of your light and heavy attack buttons. You only ever need to chain 3 button presses together, but depending on the combo, you can trip an enemy, pop them into the air, or stun them. It sounds simple, but it can be fun to chain these together with your abilities in an attempt to control a crowd solo, or to see what kind of moves you can pull off. For example, I really enjoy popping an enemy into the air and then timing a special ability to hit them before they reach the ground. Or if I'm overwhelmed by a group, I'll try and trip a few to buy some time while I deal with the others. It's enough flexibility that it allows you as the player to get creative, and it's especially fun and challenging if you try to take on groups of enemies solo, like in the simulator missions we'll discuss shortly. There's also a team combo bonus that pops up occasionally if you're able to time a special attack with one of your teammates, but I found this was usually accidental and never resulted in anything thematic like you would expect from the comics. However, a more synergistic combat system will start to emerge as we get into Ultimate Alliance 2 and 3, with 3 doubling down on synergy attacks and totally eliminating the 3-button combo system. It's definitely an aspect that I wish had carried over into the third game, and returning to MUA 1 for this retrospective reminded me of just how enjoyable it was. Another aspect of combat that was removed in the third game was the ability to grab enemies. If you're in the mood to get up close and personal, you can grab an enemy and bop them in the face repeatedly. From here, you can either throw them to the side, or you can trigger your hero's unique finishing move. It's not incredibly damaging, but it's extremely thematic to watch your hero dispose of a villain in a way that only they can, and it's fun to explore what each heroes look like. Overall, the combat is simplistic, but it's surprisingly addictive. I think a large part of that is due to the uniqueness of each hero and the small amount of strategy you can use to control enemies on the battlefield. You can really play how you want and get crafty when you need to, before it gets too repetitive. It's by no means perfect, and there are definitely layers that can be added on, something the sequels will aim to do, but I was pleasantly surprised at how enjoyable the combat felt when I replayed the game for this retrospective.
I'm taking a grave risk being associated with the Masters of Evil.
Make no mistake, my friend. We all stand to lose much if we fail. Which is why I'm certain Baron Mordo will achieve success. But I would warn you, Baron, my faith only goes so far. Failure will not be tolerated, and the penalty will be most unpleasant.
Earlier I mentioned how we had a lot of side objectives to explore in the main hubs, so let's take a moment and discuss some of the optional content in the game, as well as some collectibles. I want to start off with one of the most fun inclusions, simulator discs. Simulator discs are found as you explore levels throughout the main story. When you find one, it'll let you play a mission as a specific character solo without teammates. Simulator discs serve multiple purposes though. The first is that they really challenge your skill with a hero since you don't have the aid of your teammates to fall back on. So you'll be getting really crafty with your combos and abilities in order to complete the mission, and it's a lot of fun to test your skills with your best hero. You can technically do this in the story mode too though, since Ultimate Alliance 1 gives you the option to remove characters from your team and still launch the mission. So that's there for any of you who are that hardcore. But another important part of the simulator discs are how they give you more insight into a character's backstory. Before the mission starts, your hero will begin to monologue and fill you in on their origins, as well as their association to the villain you'll face at the end of this simulation.
During World War II, I volunteered for Operation Rebirth, a program designed to create physically superior soldiers. Unfortunately, I was the program's only success, because the head scientist was assassinated. I was quickly moved to the front lines, along with my sidekick, Bucky. We won many a battle, until toward the end of the war, there was a mishap, and I fell into the freezing waters of the Atlantic.
It's another great example of how Ultimate Alliance will attempt to educate you on the Marvel Universe in natural ways. With so many characters in the game, it's nice that each hero gets a moment to shine outside of the main story. One of my favorite simulator discs is for Daredevil, where the developers attempted to simulate his blindness. For the whole mission, the environment will be extremely dark, making you focus on your HUD and slight movements in the area. It's pretty tough, but it's a nice attempt at simulating Daredevil's handicap. In general, simulator discs are a great way to test your hero's skill configuration and level them up further. You'll also get some nice rewards for achieving a certain score in the simulation, most importantly, another alternate outfit. If you're willing to strive for the bronze score on all heroes, you'll be rewarded by unlocking Silver Surfer as a playable character. This is a pretty tough goal though, and quite time consuming. I've done it before on a previous platform, but this time I just opted to use the cheat code. Another fun inclusion is trivia. Some of you may have just cringed when I said that, and I'm usually not a fan for trivia either, but like the simulator discs, the trivia rewards players who are fans of the Marvel Universe and teaches those that are new. My first time playing Ultimate Alliance, I was getting pretty much every one of these questions wrong, but I was also learning as I went, and it filled in a lot of the gaps and questions that I had regarding playable characters and the story overall. Hearing the buzzer for wrong answers is mildly infuriating, but I still left the trivia machine knowing more about these characters than when I started. The game will also lead you through many side missions where you have to talk to different people and report back with an answer. The one I remember most is Weasel, who will often approach you asking for help deciding on the best way to handle a problem of his and request you to speak to other NPCs for the solution.
Yeah, that laptop holds security information for a building called the Imperium. I can find out, but you'll have to get me the password into S.H.I.E.L.D.'s priority files. Oh, there's 3 possibilities. Jacob Fury, Baron Strucker, or Gabriel Jones. Talk to Vision. He'll be able to help.
I've honestly never found this to be an enjoyable side quest. I think the point of it is to get you engaging in dialogue with the many different NPCs around the hub, but the conversations are never very interesting, and it feels pretty tedious running from one person to the next. I largely ignored this side mission, but it was pretty humorous when you hear the outcome of Weasel making the wrong choice.
Well, your advice to go to the Baxter building was wrong. The place was crawling with S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. I had to hide out in a dumpster. I don't think I'm ever gonna wash that smell off. At least I made it to the X-Mansion.
Lastly, there are collectible sketchbooks and action figures hidden in different levels. The sketchbooks unlock different concept arts for the game, but the action figures are the most exciting ones to find. There are two types of action figures, Daredevil and Black Panther. Once you collect 5 of one type, you unlock that character as a playable hero. I absolutely love this inclusion because it gave me a lot of incentive to explore the maps, and hearing the little chirp sound effect when I picked up a figure was so gratifying. These are both very fun characters too, and I've always felt that Daredevil is one of the strongest in the game, so they are definitely worth finding. The only downside is that the figures are pretty small and dark, so spotting them can be tricky, even if you're right next to them. But that's a minor gripe, and ultimately, I really wish more games would incentivize you in meaningful ways to explore their maps, because it always enhances my gameplay experience. Plus, I'm the type of gamer that likes to search every corner of a level just in case something is hidden, so it's nice to be rewarded for that effort. The world of Marvel Ultimate Alliance is worth exploring too. There are a lot of interactable objects within each level and a lot of details to make the environments feel more complete. One of my main complaints for Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2 and 3 are the environments feel pretty empty. There are things to find in those games, but not as much as Ultimate Alliance 1. Besides the sketchbooks, simulator discs, and action figures, you'll also find loot chests, hidden rooms, skill points, XP, and upgrades, and you can tell that a lot of care went into designing each level, and you can tell it wasn't rushed. I think I've made this point a lot throughout this retrospective, but it really is something that I think makes Marvel Ultimate Alliance so special, and that is the obvious care, attention to detail, and passion for the source material that Raven Software's development team had. And I can feel that passion in every level, even in Atlantis where I felt the game was at its weakest. I also think that there is a lot of replayability in Ultimate Alliance 1. After beating the game once, you unlock hard mode with the option to either start fresh with default characters or use previous save stats, which basically acts as a new game plus. You also unlock Nick Fury after beating the game, who is a pretty enjoyable character in his own right.
You gotta thank your old man for me, Thor. Odin did one hell of a job reversing the damage Doom did to Earth.
Aye, but I believe he is presently occupied with Doom and my brother Loki.
Let's hope he's teaching them new kinds of pain. The world owes you a debt of gratitude it can never repay. But with the danger past, our task force must be disbanded.
You're a punk, Fury.
If you've made it this far with me, it's probably no surprise when I say that I love Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1. I have a lot of nostalgia tied into it because it was what really got me into the Marvel universe as a whole. Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 is a well-crafted, exciting, and creative tour through the Marvel universe, and is a great sampler for everything you might find in the comics. After playing the game, I found myself searching up information on some of my newfound favorite heroes, like Moon Knight and Black Panther, and it jump-started a passion for the Marvel property in a way I didn't expect. I have very fond memories of the first few times I played Marvel Ultimate Alliance, but my positive impressions of it go beyond nostalgia. When I initially decided to play Ultimate Alliance for this retrospective, I honestly expected it to have not aged well. I expected it to be tedious, outdated, and repetitive. I was so excited to be wrong on all of those aspects. After a couple days of playing, I would find myself driving home in my car, thinking about what team of heroes I wanted to play as next, which is surprisingly a tough decision, not because there aren't many good options, but because there are so many favorites to choose from, and all characters are enjoyable to play. I felt incredibly indecisive, and I would pretty much change up my team every time I reached the next shield checkpoint, which I think is a compliment to the game. The combat gameplay still holds up too. Even though the next 2 games in the franchise would start to lean more heavily into synergistic combat, I still felt immersed in the combat of the first game. I had gotten used to the third game's exclusion of the 3-button combo attacks and grab attacks, but replaying the first game reminded me of how much I missed them. Now I know I spent this whole video praising the game, and I think it is well deserved, but there are still some negative aspects I should mention. Firstly, the in-game graphics haven't aged well, even in the remaster. They're not terrible, and it's something you would expect from a game over a decade old, but it's still a detractor, especially on the characters' faces, some of which are downright nightmarish. Heroes that wear a mask still look pretty decent though, and you already know that the cinematic cutscenes look stellar even today. I'm also not particularly fond of the zoomed out bird's eye view perspective of our team, and I wish it was naturally more zoomed in. During gameplay, the camera will naturally zoom very far back, losing a lot of details in the characters themselves. I know I just said that the graphics of characters' faces didn't hold up, but the costumes are still nicely detailed and I like the fire effects when I zoom in close on my character. Unfortunately, zoomed out seems to be more of the default perspective intended for gameplay. Luckily, the third game will find a better middle ground perspective to view our teams. I also think that the dialogue between characters can feel kind of plain too. Unless you get one of those special dialogues between two specific characters, you're probably just going to zip through the dialogue and get to the fight. We didn't really talk much about the character-specific dialogue, but it's a really nice touch added to the game. For example, when you run into Bullseye early on, you'll get a generic dialogue between Bullseye and yourself. But if you happen to have Daredevil on your team, the dialogue will be specifically aimed at Daredevil and will now be much more personal.
If it isn't my old buddy Daredevil. Hope you aren't still angry over me killing your gal pal, Elektra.
Bullseye, I'm not a vengeful man, but in your case, I'd make an exception.
Now there you go, getting angry at me. I just hate it when people get angry. It makes me all violent.
Then come on, try getting violent with me.
It's always cool to see the special dialogue trigger, but sometimes when you expect it to trigger and it doesn't, it can feel kind of awkward. For example, I remember a scenario where I was playing as Thor and talking to Lady Sif, asking if she knew who Thor was. But to conclude this conclusion, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 is a very impressive game and is in my opinion a home run for Marvel. To take it a step further, I think Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 is Marvel's best game. Not based on sales figures or story necessarily, because that title would probably go to Spider-Man PS4, but I'm meaning in more of a general sense. To me, Marvel Ultimate Alliance represents Marvel as a whole. It is a massive roster of their most noteworthy characters, taking a tour through some of the most interesting locations against noteworthy villains. Not only that, but the story and writing do a good job of navigating casual fans through it, and also explaining need-to-know Marvel lore in a quick, easy-to-understand way. If you've never heard of Galactus, these couple lines will bring you up to speed.
Why is Galactus at war with the Skrull?
He's not. Galactus is there to consume the planet.
Whoa, this dude eats planets? I gotta get a picture of that.
He doesn't really eat them. He has machines that convert the planet into energy he can absorb. One of those devices is the muonic inducer.
So I think both new fans and veterans can get a lot out of Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1, which I think is an impressive balance to maintain. I always feel like I get something out of Ultimate Alliance each time I replay it too. This time around, I decided to try out different heroes that I hadn't played as much in the past. This led me to get hooked into Spider-Woman's gameplay, and now I fully plan on exploring some of her comics to learn more about her. So yeah, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 is still a blast and still worthy of your time if you've been considering revisiting it. I can't recommend it enough if you can get your hands on it. Unfortunately, the remastered editions are no longer available due to licensing issues, but I'm sure you could still track down a cheap Xbox 360 or PS3 copy if you wanted to. I don't really have a well-structured review grading system established right now, but I would say that Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 is a 9.5 out of 10 for me. It hits pretty much every mark, there's a ton of replayability, and it still holds up after 14 years, which is an amazing achievement for any game. So thank you to everyone at Raven Software for your work on Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1. It was a hallmark game of my childhood, and something I look back fondly on and revisit to this day. But that's pretty much all I have for this retrospective. I say that as if we haven't just talked about it for such a long time. So thank you to everyone who stuck with me for this long, and I hope you enjoyed the retrospective, and if you've played Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 before, I hope you were able to relive the game a little bit in this video. Retrospectives are a new series of videos that I would really love to continue, so definitely let me know if you would like more of these, and any potential old Marvel games you would like to see covered. Examples of games I would like to get to include Marvel Nemesis, Spider-Man 2000, Iron Man, X-Men Legends, and many, many more. Assuming this video is received well, I'll probably discuss Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2 next, but after that, I'm very open to suggestions. I'd also love your feedback on how you felt about this video and if there are aspects you would like to see covered more or less, like story, history, combat, etc. Retrospectives are naturally longer videos, at least for me, so I want to make sure that everything I'm discussing is something you would like to hear about. So thank you for any feedback or suggestions. In the meantime, if you'd like to discuss Marvel games or Marvel Ultimate Alliance with fellow fans like myself, you can join us on Discord. The link is in the description below. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Could use some help. That dude scares me.